Hi, I'm John DeDakis, and you're one to one with me. And I'm one to one with detective mystery author Bruce Robert Coffin. He's written four mystery novels based on his experience as a detective sergeant with the Portland, Maine Police Department. He's also worked with the FBI after 9/11 and counterterrorism. He's got 27 years worth of experience in law enforcement, and on the side, he's a painter. And I don't mean a house painter. I mean a really creative painter. So we're going to take a look at some of his paintings as well. Bruce, it's great to see you. Thanks for doing this.
Great to see you, John. Thank you for having me. This is great.
So let me ask you this: what is the biggest misunderstanding that people have about what detectives do?
Well, if we're talking homicide detectives specifically, I think the biggest thing is that television and novels and that kind of thing. Sometimes they have a superinflated idea of what it is we are capable of doing. Um, Not every crime can be solved. I think that's one of the nice things for me about writing fictional mystery cases is that it allows me to put some icing on the cake. To right the wrongs and hopefully the bad guys will get their comeuppance by the end of the novel. In real life, that doesn't always happen. The frustrations of that job with all the monumental things you're up against to solve a murder case are just mind-boggling. And I hope one of the goals of writing these was to try and insert as much of that as I could in such a way that you see how it affects the characters in the novels, and then I want the reader to be affected in that same way, so that you get the frustration rather than me telling you about it. I want you to feel it yourself. So hopefully that's what I've done.
Well, I can tell you from experience that you've done it. This is the most recent novel that you've written, Within Plain Sight, and what I really liked it, and what it surprised me because I mean I've read Michael Connelly and the Bosch mysteries,
Mm,
and the difference, of course, is that you are actually a detective sergeant. I mean,
right.
you've been there, and what the similarity between the two writing approaches is that it's granular. You really get a sense of what it's like. But
Mm,
the thing that it really impressed me is that Portland. I mean, your books are set in Portland, Maine. Of course, writers should write what they know.
right. Right.
And the interesting thing is that the they're very much. I mean, Bosch is set in L.A. But yet Portland people kill people in Portland too.
Right. Right.
Interesting concept.
Right.
So the thing that I noticed is that it's you're on the as a reader, I'm on the edge of my seat because I'm in the head of John Byron, the
Right.
your
Right.
protagonist,
Right.
and you are granularly going through things step by step,
Hmm.
building a case, having things fall apart,
Right.
and it really gives a reader a sense of what it's like. Did you, as a writer, try to emulate Michael Connelly, or how did you approach? How did you make that transition from the day job to writing fiction?
No, really, it's funny. When I first started writing fiction, it took, I like most writers, this. I spent 2.5 years of my life learning how to write a novel badly, but finishing one. And that book will never see the light of day, but it was the reason that I was able to get a series going, reason I was able to write a novel that anybody would want to read. And during that time, I really was afraid. I knew the most important thing, having been a long-time reader, to me, the most important thing was the writer's voice. Much like listening to an audiobook, if the book is narrated by somebody with that voice we can identify with, we love it. And it could be the greatest book in the world, but if the voice isn't someone you identify with, all of a sudden you hate it.
What do you
So
mean
I
voice?
wanted that.
What do you mean voice?
It's whatever it is. I mean, I can't really quantify what it is. I write the way I write. I write the way I think. I write the way I see things. And so the gallows humor that you see in the characters, that's me. My take on things in the book, sometimes that's me. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes the character has to go outside that. But there's a lot of me in those characters, in that the way I see the world. I think the way we all see the world is what makes the voice of the writer their voice. And I was so afraid when I first started writing, because I heard so many other writers talk about this. I was afraid that if I read too many other books in this genre, that somehow that would rub off, that it would be something that would, people would say, oh, he's just trying to do this, or he's just trying to do that. And I'd heard writers say that they had attempted to try and emulate somebody else's voice, only to get frustrated and realize how hard that is. So I thought, well, either I have a writing style and a voice that people will identify with, or I don't. The best I can do is come up with what mine is and stick with it. So I really didn't, until I realized that I had a novel under my belt, a possible book deal in the works, and a second one half written. I didn't really dive into trying to read the genre and load up on it to see what others were doing, until I got to that point. And if there was one thing that was a pleasant surprise for me, it was because I started reading Connelly at that point. Obviously, my editor was making the comparisons, and so I thought, well, geez, I probably ought to bone up on what Michael's been writing. And then what I loved was the fact that although he came from the reporter side of it, it's very clear to me, having worked the job and knowing what that he was given a peek behind the curtain. I worked closely with a lot of reporters during my time, but you were very guarded all the time as well, if that makes any sense. So it's obvious he was allowed to look behind. He knows the stories. He knows the life. People shared things with him they wouldn't normally share. And it shows in his writing. I mean, to me, it's as realistic as anything out there when it comes to procedurals. So,
how long would you say that it actually took you from the time you first started writing to when you actually got, an agent interested? How long did that take?
I started writing in the winter of 2012, again for the first time in 30 years. And I had an agent by November of 2014.
So that's about
is that right?
about 2
2015.
years?
2015.
Okay, so
2015.
they told me there'd be no math with this
Right, right.
interview,
Almost
but
4 years.
okay, fair
Almost
enough.
4 years. Yeah.
Okay, well that's actually
Yeah.
pretty fast, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, as you know, when you're doing it, nothing seems fast about this. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah, I
like,
do.
the cutting yourself and bleeding on the page actually takes a long time to bleed out, I guess, on the page. So, yeah, I mean, I think for some people it definitely is. Everyone has a different path to get here, and even once you get here, the path to stay on the path is different for all of us as well. So, some people would look at that as an overnight sensation, but for me, I look at it as I'm the guy in high school that wanted to be a novelist. So to not get published for the first time until you're 52 is definitely a long time, and that, in my mind, that's how that works. So.
Now, one of the things I teach is interviewing techniques. And of course, as a reporter, I've done a lot of interviews. And as a detective, you've done a lot of
Mhm.
interviews. And one of the things that uh, uh, when you and I talked in Nashville last summer, one of the things that I learned is that one of the interview techniques that I teach is let the silence also be part of the process. So help the reader or the viewer understand how you've used silence in an interview to make some progress in a case.
Well, there's really two different ways that we used it. And I always find it funny. The more time I spend with reporters or former reporters or recovering reporters, I guess is what people like to call it now, right? The more I realize how good they were at questioning, doing the interviews the same way. I mean, you didn't have the table to have anybody come to sit in the room with you, but it's the same exact psychological games that you play. And there are two things. As a detective, it was incumbent upon you to try and figure out what it was you needed to do to get the person to open up, how you worked with them, how you identified with them, how you bridged the gap, whatever it was you had to do to get them to open up. Once you got them talking, you wanted to allow them to go. You didn't want to stop and ask clarifying questions. You do that after they're done. Let them unload. You know, the priest wouldn't be stopping anyone in the confessional if they were on a roll. They're going to let them go, while they're tallying up all the things they're going to have to do, right, for penance. But so that was the first one. And then the second one was sometimes the way to get someone to open it up was the same. I remember doing this after transporting a prisoner in a marked police car to the jail or to the station, saying nothing. There is nothing more uncomfortable in a room with two people that really don't know each other than to have the person who's really in the driver's seat, as it were, not say anything. I mean, that's just uncomfortable people want to fill space. You've heard people say, I can't help. Sorry, I talk so much. I can't help it. I'm nervous. That's a thing. And with some people, it is their only thing. And so sometimes by doing absolutely nothing, and you'll hear them. They'll carry on the entire conversation, and you're not saying anything. You're just absorbing it. So that worked many times.
Right. People love to talk about themselves. And in my experience, it's question, answer, and then you leave the mic out there. And that's when you usually get your sound bite.
Right.
When there's that 1.5 seconds of dead air. In your experience, I think you told me that about 80% of the time, allowing that silence, the next thing that was said moved the case forward about 80% of the time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny. It happens so often. I mean, it's like anything that happens too often. We look at it as a cliche or whatever, but it is. That's exactly how it works. It's hard to describe, and I think it would be hard to do an interview in a novel that way. Have it take too long. But if you were inside the suspect's head, that would be a great one to do, because that inner dialogue would be, oh my God, why is he staring at me? What's he thinking about right now? Can he tell I've done it? But from the detective's perspective, it would be difficult because there's nothing really happening. You're evaluating what you see, but 80-90% of the work that you're doing is just trying to make them uncomfortable. And it's probably the same game that I suspect a therapist would play, someone who's trying to get inside your head. They know that you're covering up. They know you're hiding. They know you're holding back. And they basically just kind of let you vomit out your own confession is really what ends up happening. So a lot of times, especially with people if they were first-time offenders and weren't veterans of the system and knew the game better than anyone else, a lot of times just being uncomfortable was enough to push things forward.
So let's talk a little bit about Within Plain Sight. That's your most recent novel, but I also want to talk about the one previous to that, because there's a real story connected with that. How much of your own personal experience is in Within Plain Sight?
I mean, there's a fair portion of that, I think, in all the books. I think as the series has gone along, I obviously still have relied on my own personal experience to write different, parts of the novel. But I also have found myself expanding my reach in that sometimes I will pull in things that I have learned from other police officers. Case in point is John Byron's alcoholism, which is front and center and prevalent and destroying his life in the very first novel, Among the Shadows. When we meet John, I intentionally gave you someone who was still a great detective sergeant and still a great supervisor and leader, but a horrible example to follow. His life was in shambles, and my goal was to have him move forward and begin to trust people and begin to realize that he couldn't solve his own problems without reaching out for help. And so that's sort of his progression as the series goes along. And the further I got into that, the more I found myself needing help from fellow officers that had information I didn't have personally, so that I could make it really ring true to readers that would know the difference,
Okay, so now this is me asking an inappropriate question, and you don't have to answer. But I mean, if you're going to write from a point of view of a person who's got to struggle with addiction, is this something that you've had to struggle with yourself?
I haven't personally, and I tell people if I'm an alcoholic, I haven't admitted it yet, so that's a good thing. But I suspect in most businesses, I imagine you personally probably have experienced this in the different, jobs you've held. You get really close to, I've had it in my family. I've had it in my work family. and I've been involved in interventions, and I've seen it end badly for people I cared about. And so for me, I think that was just a real honest way to portray a longtime detective sergeant, a career detective sergeant. I knew it was one of the aspects of the job that was there on a daily basis, and it was way too prevalent among my peers. And so I wanted that to be part of John. So really, what I'm writing is what I've seen, what I've experienced myself, and then where I need to fill in the blanks, I've gone to the source to have them tell me, their dark and dirty secrets, so that I can create John in a way that it makes sense. And John's support network also has to be very knowledgeable in this, because he's going to have to turn to people.
What
So I
kind of
wanted to get that right.
what kind of feedback do you get from other cops
Great.
who read your stuff?
Yeah, it's been great. As a matter of fact, it's funny because every time one of my recovering coworkers or friends or whatever from the job, not necessarily even on my own department, finish reading one of these books, the first thing they do is pick up the phone or send a private message and go, "Man, you nailed that! Like right on." So bravo. And so I hope I'm. You never want to get preachy. None of these things are. Whatever it is you put in a book, I don't ever want to preach, but I
Yeah.
want to be able to put the reality in, so that if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. If it's painful, I want the reader to experience that pain through the characters. And so I think, like I tell people, you can tell stories about anything. We all obviously have some gift at storytelling, or we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. But there are people that can move you as well. I think anytime you're drawing characters who have similar things to what the readership will have in their lives, good and bad, I think that's how we as readers identify with those characters. That's what makes them real. Anytime I can evoke an emotion out of a reader, anything short of throwing the book across the room, but another kind of emotion, especially if it's sorrow, that's a powerful emotion. And
Yeah.
I just, to me, it just makes me happy to know that I've gotten the same reaction out of the reader that sometimes came to me as I was writing scenes.
The third novel that you wrote, I have not read yet, but I want to. It's called Beyond the Truth. And you told me the story in Nashville about what's behind that one. You've said that it's, I think, one of your favorite books or the best one you've written or something.
Right.
Please tell the story, that what inspired it and what it's about.
So really, I think it's when I first started writing, there's no way I would even have attempted a book like that. I knew I was going to have to dive deep to write that book. But at the same time, it was the perfect story to write, in that when I imagined where John Byron would be by the third novel, which initially it was only a 3-book deal anyway, um, I knew that I wanted John to be pushed, that he needed to either man up and take a stand and address his problems, or they would destroy him. So those were his two choices. That was the crossroad. And to do that, I had to have a story that rang true. And as you and I know, look at, or as anyone knows, that hasn't been living in a cave. The last handful of years have been horrible years for law enforcement in general. And I've seen a lot of different things happen, both locally and also on a national scale, that change people's perceptions in a negative way toward law enforcement. And unfortunately, because of the job I had, I also got to see a lot more things back to the behind the curtain thing. I got to see things up and close and personal. And I realized how different in real life those things were than the way they were being perceived or portrayed sometimes. So I thought, like most of these books, it always starts with a what if. The nugget was, okay, well, what if something like, that happened? What if a Ferguson kind of thing happened in Portland, Maine? What would happen? Who would try to take advantage of it? Who would come out of the woodwork and do whatever? Who would look at it as a platform to try and accomplish something? Who
When
would
you
be
say, just to clarify, when you say
yeah,
Ferguson, you're talking about Ferguson, Missouri, and
correct, correct.
the
Yep,
police being involved with
right.
a racial shooting.
Right, exactly, exactly, and so it really kind of started from that, and I didn't want it to be, like I say, I didn't want to be preachy, but I wanted to have, which at their heart, most mysteries are you being led by the writer. And I think the best writing is the writing that mislead yourself as the reader. If I've given you enough that you draw your own conclusions prematurely, then I've done my job, because by the time the book ends, you'll be like, oh my God, you'll be totally surprised. And to me, that's what happens a lot of times in real life. People think they have a good handle, but they're only seeing what they're shown. They're not seeing every little facet of these cases. So for me, I thought, geez, what a great storyline to write. And basically, I leave the reader hanging in such a way that they think they have it figured out, and then they think they have it figured out again. And as more things unravel, or the onion begins to be, peeled back, you realize there's so many different things, and nothing is black and white. There are so many different variables, things you didn't know about, people doing things behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to give the reader something to digest beyond what everyone thinks they know about these
And if
things.
and if my gut is right, writing this book was in a sense a catharsis for you because of the death of your partner. Am I right?
It was certainly some of the scenes in there were born from that. One of my coworkers died prematurely, and I've had a bunch. I think you and I talked about a bunch, but without getting into too much detail in that, those really affected me. Some of them were, I think, the reasons that I picked, 27 years to be the end of the career. I just felt like I'd come to the end of the road. If you remember the old BC comic where
Right.
the caveman's walking along and he's heading for the horizon where the road converges, and he gets there and it's just, there it is. There's no more road. That's why he was seeing that the whole time. I felt like I'd arrived at that point in my career. And, the death of some of my coworkers definitely sped that along. I felt like there's nothing else for me to, but for me at that point, I reached back into those memories and those painful experiences. And I thought, yeah, these belong in this book. These have to go in this book. So that was part of it. I knew I could write that realistically, and I've managed to make most people who've read those scenes get very teared up, and that's rewarding for me as a writer. So, because
You
I felt that way as I was writing them.
I was going to say you probably cried while you wrote it.
Yeah, they were definitely moving, and I was a little nervous at having that reaction with fictional writing, but there was so much reality in those scenes, so much honesty in those scenes that I'm glad that it translates to the reader.
Here's something I don't understand, and that is, in the times we've talked and I've had a chance to get to know you, you don't come across. You seem like a really optimistic, engaging, affable kind of person, not nihilistic. Not life is terrible and everybody sucks kind of person. Why is that?
Um, well, I hope that's who I am inside. I obviously carry the additional baggage, the stuff you have to check when you get on the plane, they won't put in the overhead. I obviously do carry that, and that's just a result of almost 3 decades in the job that I had. I saw the worst of humanity. But I've been given some distance between that career and this. And this really, I feel like, gave me a second life, not just a career, but a second shot at being me. I felt like when I left the last job, I left my family behind, which was very, very difficult emotionally to kind of wrap your head around.
Mhm.
No one prepares you for that. They tell you what your pension's going to be and this and that, but they don't tell you there's a psychological component to leaving.
Yeah.
All the things that you thought you wanted to get away from, you end up missing, including that camaraderie. So for me, finding a new band of crazies in the writing community it's a total reward, and I think that's probably part of what you're seeing. I'm getting to fulfill as a 60-year-old man the dream of the 17-year-old kid, and so for me, it's like a second shot. It's like a rebirth. I'm very excited about what I'm doing and who I'm hanging out with and what I'm getting to learn. It's nice to have fans. It's nice to have fans as well. So
I wanted, before I move on to talking about your creativity as an artist, let's talk just briefly, because it's been in the news so much, and that's the police and the way they engage with unarmed African Americans and people of other races.
mhm.
Um, let's talk briefly about racism within the ranks.
Hmm.
Is that, you're not working for any kind of police department right now.
Right.
Can you say, based on your experience, that there is institutional racism within law enforcement? And I know it's difficult to make a blanket statement, but
Right.
you've
Right.
been in it for enough time, to know, is that perception valid?
I can only give you my own experience, my own, myopic impression because of where I worked. I worked in a regional area. And it's amazing. I mean, obviously, there are places I have not worked, so I can't speak for those places. And I know that, I've done some interviews before with other writers, minority writers, where those kind of questions come up. And I point out that, the experience of some of these writers is going to be far different than my own personal experience because of where we live. I can tell you that in the New England area, I don't see it as an issue at all. I have considered myself my whole life to be colorblind. I don't know if it's probably not the popular thing to say at the moment, but I've always kind of felt like that. When I created the characters in this book, I really intentionally made a well-rounded group of detectives. And the reason I did that was because that's representative of who I worked with. There really was a sense of team. There really was a camaraderie. And we came from all walks of life. I mean, it didn't matter, brown, black, white, gay, straight, atheist, hardcore Catholic, Muslim. It didn't make any difference. We came together. We worked as a team. We worked as a family, and we thought of ourselves that way. So all of those extra things that came with us, I felt like made us a better team because we had the knowledge and the feelings and the experience that a single person could never have. And so I think with that comes a lot of empathy. Obviously there are places and there are things and events that make me boil up inside and get mad. And some of that is the law enforcement people doing what they've done, and it drives me insane because I know what the fallout will be. And some of it, I think, is unfair characterization. We all know bad attorneys. We all know bad lawyers, or not
Or
lawyers, doctors,
journalists.
journalists. I mean, we all know people that will take advantage of the power that they have. And I've never thought, well, my God, I met a bad attorney, so all attorneys must be horrible. I dealt with a bad reporter, so all reporters are horrible. I just don't think that's a healthy way to be at all, and I don't believe it for a second. I mean, I don't think it's an institution. I don't think it's racist at its core at all. If it was, I can tell you right now, I would never have been part of it, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So,
What about police reform? I mean, the catchphrase is defund the police. I think that probably is a little extreme because
right,
it's unrealistic. But,
right.
is substantial reform required, do you think, in law enforcement?
I don't think it is. To me, the honest answer is that I think what you see, a case in point. Some of these events that have become larger than life, we've all seen. We've seen video, we've seen all kinds of stuff, and you look at it and you still can't believe that it happened. And I say to people that I don't think you need new regulations. I think what you need to do is enforce what you already have. I
What do
think
you mean?
part of the problem is, if you have a systemic issue with a police officer in your department, and it's better for the politicians, some of them at the top of the hierarchy, some of them across the street at City Hall or whatever it happens to be, for things to just kind of get tamped down and go away or get slid under the rug, then you're not addressing problems. You're not addressing alcohol issue. You're not addressing anger management issues. You're not addressing PTSD issues. And everybody knows who the officers are that tend to go too far in any incident, or the ones that are saying things that are not right or thinking things that are not right. Everyone knows who they are. So until you take the time where it's worth, cleaning house to make sure that those kinds of officers don't stay in your department, then you're going to continue to have problems like this. I mean, you have to deal with these issues. And, if it's something that's been going on for years, it's not like it just happened. Oh, wow, we never saw this coming. If you go back and you look at the history, And I'm sure it was the same in your business. I'm sure there were reporters where you went, holy crap, how is this guy still employed? Or how is this woman still doing this, allowed to get away with it? And there's politics in every business. And I think those politics have no place in law enforcement. I think that's part of the problem. You have to treat this as what it is. We all love to throw words around like PTSD or I don't know what the new one is, PTSI or something. There's not a disorder, but an injury or whatever it is. They change the thing all the time. I can't keep up. But we all love to throw those words around and talk about them. But then when it comes time for the rubber to hit the road, people start, I'm not really, if they were friends and I would look bad. Maybe I wouldn't get promoted and those can't, when you're dealing with life or death situations, those can't be the things that control your decisions. You have to do the right thing by everybody. Or those kinds of things are going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I don't think, people get confused about what the thin blue line is. For me, the thin blue line had nothing to do with keeping quiet. That might have been the law enforcement of old. There's no question that things have changed. But for me, it was just that we were it. We stood between chaos and the society we all want. And there's no superpowers that come with that. I was never issued a cape at the academy. You do the best you can. You learn what you can learn. You hopefully develop as you go. You hopefully stay impartial. You hopefully stay full of empathy. And it's very difficult when you look around today to sometimes find empathy for society when you see the way they treat each other. Right. But those are the things that are most important to do this job and to remember that you're there to protect the people who can't protect themselves. And when you start to become the judge or the jury, you've missed the boat, you've missed the mark, and it's time to move on.
What did you do with the FBI after 9/11 in fighting counterterrorism?
I worked for them for 4 years. My title was I was a special deputy U.S. Marshal assigned to the Boston Division JTTF, which is the Joint Terrorism Task Force. And we worked all kinds of things, developing assets, tracking down any kind of leads. It's amazing, without getting into any detail, it is amazing where threads of those types of cases will take you. You realize the planet is much smaller than you imagine when you start working those cases. Things that happen, 2,000, 5,000 miles away have a direct impact on the areas that we all live. And there's always something going on. You'd be amazed, I think, at the stuff that happens. You probably sleep better not knowing every night what's going on. But I can tell you it was an eye-opening experience for me. And it was an opportunity to work with an entirely different group of people. I have a new appreciation I thought my paperwork was bad when I was just working for the PD. But you try being a Fed and realize how much paperwork there is. It's unbelievable. But a great bunch of people. And I know we did a lot of good in the time that I was there. So,
but you can't really talk about it.
Can't really talk about it. But suffice it to say, there's a lot of people out there working on a lot of different threats. And they're doing a good job, and they're the people you'll never hear about.
Are you contemplating writing a memoir?
I wouldn't do a memoir, but I would do, probably because it would take forever to ever get the thing approved anyway. But I might delve into the fictional realm of maybe espionage or that type of thing. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. I've got all kinds of ideas. It's always a matter of time to get them written.
So many ideas, so little time.
It's true.
I want to get to the creative, the artsy side, because you've got some real talent there, and I want to give people a sense of this. So it's going to take me just a minute to throw these up on the screen. Let's take a look at this one first. Tell us this story.
That is little Ava. And Ava was a birthday, that oil painting was a birthday gift for a friend of mine, his wife, actually. And we set this whole thing up where she didn't know me from Adam. And they had me come over to the house, and it was a planned event. And we picked a really nice day, and it was going to be an hour-long photo shoot, which basically consisted of me trying to keep up with Ava as she ran around the yard, showing me all her cool things and her different outfits and whatever else. And but we played it up, and So I probably took 500 photographs, and believe it or not, anyone that's ever dealt with cameras will know this already. This picture was probably one of the last I took. So it took all day. You know, it was unbelievable how, you know, it just seemed like forever taking pictures, and, you know, none of them, when I went back and looked later on, were worth it. And this one jumped right out at me as one of the best. And of course, she's not wearing an outfit that would be easy to paint. Right, but the lighting was perfect. I mean, and she looks angelic. I mean, she just has that look, the backlighting and whatever. So we kept the ruse up. I sent him a couple of the high def things we printed, and then he framed those up for Christmas gifts. And so she thought that was the follow through for the photos. And then the following spring, so it was about a year from the time I started the project. They took delivery of the oil painting, and she burst right into tears. So that, to me, that's always the best. Look at me, I'm trying to make people cry with my writing and with my painting. But yeah, no, that was a great one. That really was a lot of fun.
And
I did give
painting
him a hard time.
oil must be
Right.
difficult to do.
It is. Well, I mean, it's great blending, you know, for those nice soft. You see, there's a lot of soft imagery in that, which is great. But it also takes forever to dry. It isn't like, you know, watercolor or any of those other types of things where you can speed things along with a hair dryer. Oil doesn't work that way, so you're kind of at the mercy of how long it takes things to dry.
I'd like you to tell this story, or the
Hmm.
story behind this painting here.
Hmm. Oh, that one was difficult. We had lost a coworker that was beloved by everyone in the police department, and he was only 51, I think, 51 or 52 when he died, and it was a shock for all of us. You know, kind of a natural born leader guy, and we were all knocked over. I mean, the place was just depressing to be around for the first few days after he died, and so. And he left behind a wife and two children, two young girls that were now fatherless. And so I decided to take my creativity and try and recapture. This is actually taken from an image that was I think it was in the Press Herald here in Portland, and it was taken by one of my coworkers, Kelly Waters. And I said, geez, I'd really love to do an oil painting from some of these pictures you've taken. And so what I came up with was this image, and I said to people what I was going to do was, and it's actually large, it's 4 feet square, so you're talking, you know, 16 square feet of canvas, that I wanted to capture this moment. To me, that was the most somber but respectful moment of the service that day. And it was freezing cold that day. I mean, it was unbelievable. Like, you know, you could see your breath and your toes hurt and your fingers hurt. It was brutal. So it just added to the misery of the day. So I began painting that, and the deal was that we would make 120 prints, limited edition prints would be made of this image, and then we'd sell those off, and then the money that was made would be used for the two girls' education later on. So we bought bonds. I think I ended up raising $7,500 totally for this, and that painting now hangs in the police station, go on the second floor landing at 109, heading up the thing. So everybody sees it every single day when they're walking up the stairs to the classroom. So I just felt like it really captured what the job is. And I can tell you that sitting in that service that day, amongst all the uniform people that had come out to pay their respect, was something that I pulled heavily from in writing some of the scenes we had talked about earlier.
Yeah.
There's nothing more emotional than those services, especially, you know, if a relative gets up and speaks or that type of thing. So.
Well, and here's one that's a different kind of emotion.
Yeah, that's Friends. That was a lot of fun to do. Actually, I was dying to do some kind of a winter painting, and that came from a New Year's weekend where my whole family and a bunch of our friends went away. We rented a big old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere in Pineland Farms, Maine. And we just kind of hung out all weekend together, and, you know, played with the kids outside during the day, sliding and all this other stuff. And so this one afternoon, the girls had gone off shopping, and we were left alone. They were brave enough to leave us alone with the kids, and we did sliding, we built snowmen, we did the whole thing. And this little guy at one point, while everybody was building ramps to try and jump over and break their backs, went over and was really examining the snowman we had built as if he was a real person. And I captured that moment without him knowing, which to me, it's always the best time to get photographs of kids so that you can use later on for painting when they don't know anyone's watching, because they are the real thing. And the way he was enamored with the thing, almost like he was going to carry on a conversation, I just couldn't get over. So I snapped as many shots as I could, and then those became the basis for Friends.
How much time do you spend taking photographs and doing paintings?
Now, none, absolutely zero.
Really?
Yeah, when I finally decided to put my money where my mouth was and really make a real hard effort into writing and getting published and all that other stuff, I found, I found I didn't miss it, and I think because I'm using the same side of my brain, I'm just finding a different way to tell stories than I was as an artist.
So
And
really,
it's very similar.
most of the art was while you were still a detective.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Was it a way to process and in the sense let your subconscious, ruminate about a case?
I think it was a way to escape. It
Okay.
really, I think that's how it started. I think it did two things. I started about 10 years in that was when I started painting. And I got started. I don't know how many people probably have this same scenario, but I used to draw really well all through school. And I remember watching Bob Ross on the PBS channel on weekends. Like it would be a rainy weekend, there's nothing happening, and I'd flick the channel around, and there he is with the big curly hair and the 3-inch house painting brush, and he's making happy trees and happy clouds. And I used to think, my God, if this guy can do this with a house brush, why am I not teaching myself to paint? And so that really came from there. It was an escape, I think, from the stresses of police work. And this is one of my favorites. That's called Hope. And actually, that was a gift. I was commissioned to paint this gift for an outgoing Rotary governor, chapter governor in our area, Ann Lee Huzzy, who is a polio survivor. And she travels overseas all the time on these big inoculation kicks where they'll try and hit every village they can hit, and then maybe 10, 20,000 people in a 3 or 4 days span, and try to get them inoculated against polio to keep it from spreading to in these different third world countries. It's still a threat, and she's been tireless. And so always millions of photos from the trips that she's on. And her husband secreted me, and we went through a bunch of photos. And when I came up with this one, I said, yeah, this is the one I'm painting right here. This is, the innocence of this child. And it's almost like take your medicine. You can tell he's hopeful that this is a good thing, but he's also kind of terrified, and like we all are, I guess, when we're that age. And
Well, dude, you need to now do one about getting the anti-COVID vaccine. That's more than, everybody
Right.
lined up and got the polio vaccine.
Right.
No questions asked. It
Right.
wasn't taking away our freedom.
Yeah.
So, I think it's time for one more painting.
I'm not sure that would be a big seller. I think everyone's so tired of that at this point. But
I know.
yeah, that was a lot of fun to do. I presented that to her. She had no idea this was coming, and she's a woman she's very controlling. She's very regimented. She's got a heart of gold, but she runs a show, and she had to come back up on stage in front of 300 people and have me present that to her. And they were waterfalls. That was a waterfall moment.
Wow.
It was great. So,
what's the story behind this?
This one,
you on the right. That's you on the right.
Yeah. Look at, I got maybe 3 more hairs, and, they're a lot more brown, which is nice. Yeah, that was a younger me. I was working we talked about earlier. I was working as part of the Joint Terrorism Task Force out of Boston, and the New England chapter of the FBI National Academy approached me because we were coming up on the 100th anniversary of the FBI, and they all knew I painted. So the current president at that time said, "Hey, we got to talk to this guy because maybe he can come up with something that would be really cool for the Boston division as a gift to present to them." So they wined me and dined me and had me come down to the Portsmouth Air Base, and we talked for an afternoon. And I came up with this idea of painting Edwin Shanahan, who was the first agent ever killed in the line of duty back in 1925. And all I had to work with, I actually hitched up with the historian. There's a full-time historian that works for the FBI. And he sent me newspaper articles and all kinds of stuff. But the original cred photo that Shanahan carried was torn. And so they had to do a little repair work on that. I spent a little time on that myself. And then that's all I had was just a little bust of this guy, an old kind of sepia-tone bust. And from that, I came up with the idea of having the 1924 Model T, which this guy was killed in 25. I had to do the research for everything. The American flag, which ended up being very large in this picture, so it didn't really come into play too much. But back in 1925, there were only 48 stars, so that was different. Everything was different, and
this is during Prohibition too. So was it related to that? Did he die in relation to that?
Well, what was actually happening at the time? He was killed in a shootout. They were staking out a parking garage in Chicago, where a known car thief was. The tip was that he'd been dumping stolen vehicles there. So Shanahan, along with some Chicago police officers, were staking the garage out, and when he turned up, it turned into a firefight, and Shanahan was killed. And it's funny because we talk about corruption and prohibition and all the things that were going on, and I can't help but wonder if he might have been sleeping with the enemy at that time as well. As he's hanging out with Chicago. Yeah, who knows? But yeah, so that whole thing had to be come up with from scratch. That Tommy gun is a real Tommy gun. I borrowed that from our department, the archives, and I used my own body as the model for that. Which took forever to film because I didn't have an assistant. So I was depending on a tripod and timers and everything else. And I spent an entire afternoon trying to get the light right so that it would match what I was seeing in the cred photo and the angles right and everything else. And so that became a year-long project. And I presented that to the SAC of the Boston field office at the annual FBI Christmas party down in Boston on the waterfront. And it still hangs in their seventh floor conference room in the Boston field office. So there's a little part of history that I've hopefully made live on, which is kind of cool.
So what's next? What are you working? Are you working on another John Byron mystery?
I am. I'm finishing up another John Byron, and I am also endeavoring to try and see if I can get further into a standalone. I've got a bunch of standalone ideas, but I'm fickle about it. They seem like they change daily, so I've just got works in progress that just keep going. When
you say standalone, are you thinking in terms of literary fiction, which would be different than a mystery?
No, I think I would still have. I don't think I would dare to go too far from that because I think I've really now got a passion for mystery writing. I mean, I loved reading that stuff anyway, but now I just sort of feel like that's a lot of fun. It's a great way to tell a story. And really, if we look at it, all the stories that we've enjoyed all have some element of mystery to them. I mean, you don't get shown everything right up front, or what would be the point of a story, I think the only exceptions to that would be things like when the Hollywood treatment of Apollo 13. We all knew what was going to happen, but you're sitting on the edge of your seat going, oh my God, they're not answering the radio. And, but I think there's always an element of mystery. So for me, it would be just trying to step outside of my comfort zone. I'm trying to absorb all the things I can right now from writers that have done something different, Joe Finder and Harlan Coben. And there's just so many good mystery writers out there. Gail Lynns. There's a lot of people that do different types of mystery writing, and I'm trying to see what kind of tricks of the trade I might be able to learn from reading their structure and that kind of thing. So,
well, help me understand the difference between a standalone and a series. I mean, obviously a series continues, but what's the attraction of wanting to write a standalone?
I think for me, it allows me to be a little more creative in that, like anything you do, I think when you start writing a series, you don't really pigeonhole, but you've now painted the boundaries of your playing field, because you've been writing a series, and there are certain things that the readers expect. There are certain things the publisher expects, and it's really hard to go astray of that and not risk, alienating your fans. So I think we all kind of know that. For me, doing a standalone means, well, the first thing every publisher asks is, geez, could you see this as a series?
Right, exactly.
And, but I think to myself, the last thing I want is more voices inside my head. A standalone would be great, I think, because it would give me the opportunity to have a one and done. I take these people on a journey and it has a conclusion, and then that's it. Like, I'm writing to have everything that needs to go into that book be in that book, because there won't be a follow-up book to it, you know.
But does this though mean that you'd have to write under a pen name or something like that?
No, I don't think. I mean, you know, your agent makes all your decisions for you, don't they? I mean, you know, ultimately, I'll do whatever Paul Meunier says I have to do. But no, I think, you know, I think if you've got an established fan base already, the goal with any new project is probably to endeavor to add to your base, and
Yeah.
so
I
I
mean,
think that would just be
I've been
fun.
interested. I've been interested in literary fiction, and I went to
Mhm.
my agent, and she said, "Yeah, you should do that under a pen name," um,
I
because
think if you
she's
go too far astray, they worry about that, because
well,
you want to add to your audience, but not necessarily just go find a new one. You know,
exactly.
because you'll lose the fan base. You know,
Right, right.
look how well that worked out when J.K. Rowling started writing something different. You know, the fans got angry. You're like, okay,
Exactly.
well, you know. But yeah, I think in the end, I'm not sure that works anyway, because at some point you have to come out. They know, they figure it out. I mean, you know,
Exactly.
that Richard Bachman disguise didn't work that long for Stephen King. Whether that was a scripted plan or not, I don't know, but people figured it out pretty quickly. So,
What about screenplays? Is that something that you're interested in trying to adapt your novels to the screen?
well, you know, I would love that. I think everybody would love that. You know, I
Have you
hear
tried
people
doing it?
complain. I have not. I know there's software, and I know some of my friends have already made the dive into that pool. I just feel like it might be something else I get lost in. I figure I'll leave that to the experts, and I'll stick with storytelling, which seems to be the thing that's working for me. So maybe somebody else can see, you know, because I think it's a different brain too, don't you? I mean, I think it's,
Oh, totally. I've tried to do
you
it,
know,
and it's you have to be visual,
right,
and we're word guys, so
right.
it's an entirely different mind shift that has to happen.
You know, I see, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but the book 11/22/63 by Stephen King. I love that
Right.
novel. I thought it was great. You know,
About the
he
Kennedy
yeah,
assassination.
yeah, he reopened with his own way of telling it, with a different look at, you know, an alternate future and all this other stuff. And I thought that was a great story. But I also realized as I was reading it, holy God, this big long book is first person. You know, I don't know how you do that. I would be literally at my wit's end, not being able to get into anyone else's head. You know, it's always from his standpoint.
Sure.
And then when I heard they were going to make a series, I thought, Jesus, how is that going to work? Because, you know, like when I write John Byron, you get to see inside his head. You know, he's showing you what he's thinking.
Right.
And, you know, we all know, unless somebody's going to come on and do the cheesy narrator voiceover, it doesn't work. So when I was watching it, I was fascinated to see that they actually created a character that he would spend time with that wasn't in the book, so that they could have conversations to get out the information that had been inside his head in the novel. So yeah, I don't think I have the brain for that. I'd really have to rewire everything to think that way.
Okay,
And you run the risk it changes your writing, I think, as a novelist.
so as a detective, did Oswald act alone?
As a detective, or as me? You know,
Yeah.
people
Well,
love
what do
they.
you? Well, I mean,
You know,
you've been a detective, so
yeah. I
did
tell
they
you,
get it right?
I he may have actually pulled off the assassination by himself, but I don't believe for a second that he acted alone. I know enough about him and enough about what was going on at that time to not buy that story.
So what do you
Uh,
who do you think was involved with him?
well, I think Kennedy had a lot of enemies. You know, it was we did. I went down to Dallas, my wife and I, at the Bouchercon convention a couple years ago, and it was great to get to check out the museum at Dealey Plaza and kind of really see that. It's amazing. It took you right back in time. You know, I felt like had changed and moved back in time to 63. But, you know, they showed you a lot of things that were going on in the world. And knowing the history, I know how many enemies JFK had, and both foreign and domestic enemies.
Right.
He had problems with the mob because of his brother's diligence in going after them. I think they were slighted, having helped him get elected, allegedly. So he really had a lot of people that were not happy with him, and so it might have just been a joining of forces to get that done. And we,
Well, I mean,
you know,
the Cubans could have been involved. The
yeah,
CIA could have been
CIA,
involved.
yeah, yeah. There were a
Okay,
lot
but I
of,
mean,
you
what's your
know.
best guess? I mean, have you studied it enough to have a theory?
Well, I figure that, you know, best laid plans, there was always a backup plan. I think what happened to him afterwards, it's real easy to believe that was scripted. If he actually got away that day, that there would be a way to end him so that he wouldn't be able to talk. And I think that was very efficiently accomplished.
So you think Jack Ruby didn't just, get upset?
No, no. No. Can you imagine how much trouble you or I would be in if we were assigned to protect him, to get him someplace, and we allowed this guy just to walk in and shoot him? Can you imagine? I mean, trust me, they were on high alert.
But it's my understanding that Ruby just happened to show up. He'd been at the bank just a few minutes before, and then just walked down there. I mean,
why did he care?
Well, he was upset.
Right. Well, we were all upset, but he was the only one that actually did that. So, and coincidentally was about to die of cancer. I thought that was a great patsy kind of move as well. So, who knows? I mean, I don't know.
He didn't die until what, 67 or something like that. So
right.
Did
but
he
I think
even
he
have
knew
cancer
even
at
then.
the time? Really?
Yeah, I think he did then. And who knows? I mean, that's just my own personal philosophy on that. But I hear people talk about conspiracies all the time, and I always laugh because between my work with the feds and my work with the local PD, I can tell you I was part of many conspiracies where we did things, trying to bait somebody to come in for the motorcycle they just won in a contest they never entered, and we'd clear up warrants that way. I mean, everything you do is a conspiracy to try and to accomplish something if you're undercover or that kind of thing. So.
Well, the understanding I have about conspiracy theories is that often people can build a whole cottage industry over holes in investigations. So they can start to create dots that don't even exist.
Right.
And I think what you're saying is, though, that sometimes conspiracies really do happen.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you think of some of the things that we've actually managed to pull off in other countries by using assets and that type of thing. So it's really not a stretch to think that we could have done something we shouldn't have done here as well. If there's a problem and there is somebody powerful enough to get rid of that problem, then that's where those great conspiracy stories come from. The great novels come from.
Well, I think we'll have to just have a beer at the next
we'll hammer it out.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Exactly. So people, if they want to get in touch with you, they can get in touch with you through your website.
They can, BruceRobertCoffin.com. Yep.
Okay.
You'll find me all over social media. If you can't find me, then it's probably not a platform I'm familiar with.
This has been so much fun. Thank you
Likewise.
for doing this. I'm John DeDakis. I'm JohnDeDakis.com. That's how you can get a hold of me. But this is really about Bruce Coffin. He's got 27 years in law enforcement. He's written 4 detective mysteries, and they're excellent. They really give you a sense of what it's like to be a detective. So
thank you, John.
Bruce, many more books ahead for you, sir.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you. To be continued.
Yes.